Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Mini-Sode podcast, the last show of 2022. I can't believe it. And we're getting ready to go into our third season, which is amazing. And thank you all so much for listening. We get so much great feedback and input on the podcast. But today we're talking about this kind of phenomenon that recently happened in the industry where an author tweeted out that she had a book signing and like 2 people showed up and how disappointed that she was. And People Magazine did a story on this. And I think like Stephen King chimed in, Margaret Atwood. She said, she's like, I did a signing to which nobody came except a guy who wanted to buy some Scotch tape. I was there now, which I thought was just so fun. Henry Winkler, which of course we love the Fonz, but you know, everybody chimed in. And it's so funny because I talked to an author this week and she was like, I wish I had done that because I've had unsuccessful book signings, but I've never shared them. I wish I had done that because maybe people would, like come to my sort of aid. And I can appreciate that. But I think this leads into something that you and I talked about in the green room. We are, first off, do not assume that everybody else is doing better than you. Second, we are less inclined to share our failures, which I find that to be really unfortunate. I mean, not that we want to sit around and just, have a poor me whining about stuff, but it's not really whining. It's sort of like saying, not everything that I've done has worked, but I like to think that I fail up. And I talk about that with Amy because I will tell you right now, and my list is too long to go into on this mini. So, but not every, people like some, I remember one time I was introduced at an event and it was lovely, but they were like, oh, 22 years. She's like the queen of publishing and all this other stuff. I was kind of embarrassed, right? Not because I'm like humble, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm not really humble, but it was kind of like, the idea that I wrote an article. So I know I keep like jumping all over the place. I wrote an article for Publishers Weekly a bunch of years ago called Nobody is Born Famous. And what the premise was that not everything that you do is going to work just because you publish, a lot of times I think authors think I published a book. And so I have, these things are going to happen because I'm in this social media group and these things happen for this author. And so if these things don't happen for me, I'm an utter failure and I'm quitting, So it's really just about understanding. And I think going into the new year, having a different perspective on your success. And not that I'm not trying to say like, don't set the bar high because you're going to be it's not about that at all. It's about cutting yourself some slack because there are 4,500 books published every single day in this country. If you and we just recorded a podcast, we're talking about this a little bit out of order, but we just recorded a podcast about maximizing absolutely every kind of win that you get, which kind of ties into this nicely. And that is going to hit the first week in January. It's our first sort of like back to work podcast that we're talking about, but don't underestimate how much failure goes into success because they say, well, the more you fail, the more successful you'll be. And I actually think that's kind of true. I mean, Amy, what are your thoughts? Because I feel like I'm rambling about this now.
No, I agree though. You have to fail in order to get any wins because, like you said, Penny, you can't hit publish and then sit there by your door waiting for the media to show up or waiting for that Netflix deal. That's not how it works. And I think, we talked about this too, that even publishing itself tries to romanticize this business a little bit because it's very easy to find these breakout success stories, or that's what they try to make it seem like. But that's not how any of that works at all. And I actually wanted to find some good examples of people that household names that really struggled. And sadly, it was a lot harder to find those stories, even though they're very true, So they really, it's like, no, we want everybody to think that this is super awesome and easy, and everybody becomes a success story because that's how we get more authors. And it's like, that's not how that works. But here's just a few that stood out to me. I think most everybody at this point knows Stephanie Meyer, the Twilight series. She was definitely one that hit the media as this like breakout. Where did she come from? She was actually rejected 14 times before her book really started selling. This one I love. Stephen King's Carrie was rejected by 30 publishers. 30. Penny, could you even write out 30 publishers right now on a piece of paper?
No, that's amazing.
So he went through a lot. And I loved this quote. One of the letters he got back from a publisher said, "We are not interested in science fiction, which deals with negative utopias. They don't sell."
Yeah.
So I love that little like blip of history, you know, that we got with that too. And then this was another one that really stood out to me, Penny, because and not to get sidetracked on the topic, but we talk to authors a lot who get really kind of dejected because of all the effort they put into their debut novel. And it's hard to kind of push through and keep going. But Dan Brown didn't have a best-selling book until his 4th novel.
What?
Yep. 4th novel. His first 3 were virtually unknown. And then, of course, we all know the Da Vinci Code, and it's, you know, a fairy tale from there. But his 4th novel was his first best-selling novel. So again, we talk to a lot of authors that are like, this is really hard. This is, I'm getting a little, you know, dejected. And it's like, we get it, but that's why you push through.
Right.
You know, these examples here just kind of show why everybody failed. And that is part of making it. And if you're not learning something from every failure, then you need to, you know, slap yourself around a little bit and get a new perspective, like Penny said, because there is something to learn from everything that doesn't go right, because there is a better way to do it then, or a different way to go about it. Or sometimes it's just bad timing. And that's that kind of sticking to it element of it as well.
Right. That's absolutely true. And I think that one of the culprits, and I know this is a mini-sode and we've probably already gone past the normal mini-sode length, but it's also worth mentioning that nobody in social media, Facebook groups, you know, people you follow maybe on Instagram, and I'm not bashing this at all, but most of the time, in the majority of cases, they aren't willing to discuss their failures. Because that's not really what social media is about, sadly. So I would say that if you find yourself falling into this trap of, well, I'm in this group and they're all selling like thousands of books an hour and I feel like a total loser, I would say bow out of that group or mute it for a while, because it's also really about, I mean, I can sit here and say all day long that in 22 years, I've had more failures than I can even put together in a podcast, certainly. And it's true, right? But as Amy said, you got to learn from every failure. And I guess it's called failing up, but no failure is a bad failure if you have some kind of a takeaway from that. And the other piece of it too is stop being so hard on yourself. This year is really got to be about you getting out there and doing your best and knowing that you did your best. And then, you know, in some cases you kind of have to let the chips fall where they may. But I loved that she put this out in social media. I thought that was great. And anybody who has ever had a book signing, 100% can, you know, commiserate with the fact that nobody showed up. I remember one of the first book signings that I did for a romance novel, which was really not well written. Please don't ever buy it. Sorry, I sound like the worst. I remember I flew up to Oregon because the book was set there. And I did a book signing in a bookstore and I was so excited, and paper interview and all this other stuff. They had one of the most torrential rains that they've had. I mean, it was like apocalyptic. Haven't seen this kind of rain in 900 years, like that much rain. And I like sat there in the bookstore and just basically started shopping because I'm like, I feel like such a loser. I mean, weather is out of our control, but yet at the same time, I was like, I feel like, and this was literally just before I started the business, I feel like such a loser. So it's easy to paint yourself into that corner. And what I'm telling you is I'm telling you right now, everybody is in the same boat. And if they say they're not in the same boat, they're probably not telling you the truth. So I hope that this is, like I said, our end of year podcast. We are so excited. Thank you again so much for listening to us, for being with us on this journey, for giving us your feedback, your show ideas. We love reviews. And I also want to thank Amy for making me look smart by being my co-host. Because I literally, like, when we started this 2 years ago, I was like, hey, Amy, I want to do a podcast and you're going to be my co-host. And you just seen the look on her face. She was just like, oh, hell no. I guess now we're going to get into trouble for saying HE double hockey sticks, but she is a fabulous co-host, and people like sometimes comment in the reviews, like, that Amy person is so smart. I'm like, whatever.
Listen, it's my secret is that I just am really quiet for the most part. And I chime in when I'm feeling intelligent. It's all an act. It's all an act.
But I want to thank you listeners for being with us on this journey as we get into our third year, which I'm very excited. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope that you have more success than you ever imagined in 2023. And just remember, if something doesn't work out, fail up, learn from it, and move on. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.